Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're going to decode one of the most beautiful and honestly, one of the most totally deceptive structures in the entire cosmos. If you've ever looked up at the night sky and trusted exactly what you saw, well, prepare to have your perspective entirely shifted. We're diving deep into the true nature of Caldwell 39, more famously known as the Eskimo Nebula.
At first glance, it looks incredibly straightforward, doesn't it? Whether we're looking from Earth or through space telescopes, it just appears to us as a simple, round, two-dimensional bubble. You can totally see why it got its nickname. It kind of looks like a face surrounded by a furry parka hood. It's flat, it's symmetrical, and it seems incredibly peaceful.
But here's the question we really need to ask ourselves today. What if that round, 2D bubble is actually a massive cosmic illusion? Like, what if the geometry we're seeing is just a trick of our specific vantage point in the Milky Way? Astronomers actually suspected there was way more to this nebula than meets the eye, and they set out to break the illusion.
Okay, to ground the scale of this mystery, we first have to understand exactly where we're looking. This nebula is located roughly 6,500 light-years, or about 2,000 parsecs, away from us, over in the Gemini constellation. At that kind of immense distance, resolving the true shape of expanding gases is incredibly difficult. We can't exactly just fly a probe out there to look at it from another angle, right? So we have to rely on physics.
Section 1. The Shape Model. Decoding 3D Structure.
To shatter this 2D illusion, scientists used a highly specialized modeling code known as SHAPE. Here's how it works. First, they gathered incredibly high-resolution two-dimensional images. Second, they combined those with kinematic velocity spectra, which is essentially using spectrometers to measure exactly how fast different parts of the gas are moving toward or away from us. Finally, they fed all of this data into the SHAPE software to render a true three-dimensional Morpho-Kinematic model.
And boom, this is where the detective work gets really exciting. It's that huge aha moment. Look at these complex 3D wireframe models. This is the hidden architecture buried beneath that flat photograph we looked at earlier. By measuring the velocities of the gas, astronomers realize the nebula isn't a sphere at all. Parts of it are rushing towards us, and parts are rushing away, mapping out this incredibly intricate, elongated structure that we just happen to be viewing from a very specific, totally misleading angle.
To really put this into perspective, we just need to look at its cosmic twins. We have the Cat's Eye on the left and the Saturn Nebula on the right. When astronomers built the 3D model of the Eskimo Nebula, they realized it's structurally almost identical to these two. The only difference? The Cat's Eye and Saturn Nebulae are viewed from the side, they're edge-on. The Eskimo Nebula is that exact same complex shape, but rotated 90 degrees, so it is literally pointing right down our line of sight.
Section 2. The Inner Shell. A deformed peanut shape.
Now that we understand our vantage point, let's look at the true anatomy. Staring straight down the barrel of this nebula completely hides its real geometry. The inner shell of the Eskimo isn't a circle at all. The shape model reveals it's actually a deformed, peanut-like prolate spheroid, and it just so happens to be tilted a mere 9 degrees from our line of sight. It's like looking straight down at the top of an hourglass. It looks like a flat circle, but you're missing the entire elongated body hiding right behind it.
Now let's look at the kinematics, because a pretty violent picture emerges. When we measure the speeds, the outer shell, that fuzzy part that looks like the parka hood, is expanding outward at a relatively slow 16 kilometers per second. But that peanut-shaped inner shell, it is blasting outward at an unbelievable 120 kilometers per second. This massive difference in velocity tells us there is a powerful dynamic engine driving the inner structure, and it is violently ramming it into the older, slower gas of the outer hood.
Section 3. High-speed jets. Bipolar outflows.
That extreme inner velocity is actually hiding something else. The SHAPE model uncovered highly collimated, totally invisible bipolar jets shooting out of the poles of this nebula at a blistering 180 kilometers per second. To put that into perspective, that is over 400,000 miles per hour. Because of our pole-on viewing angle, these jets are aimed almost directly at us and away from us, which makes them practically invisible in your standard optical photographs.
Now, when we plot this out on a position velocity diagram, we can actually see those jets. Notice those sharp vertical spikes in blue and orange? Those isolate the specific speeds of the high-speed jets. They act like a massive cosmic exhaust system, piercing right through that outer shell in opposite directions. And that sudden, dramatic jump in velocity tells us these jets were likely launched by an episodic event long after the main shells were already formed.
Section 4. The Cosmic Engine. Magnetic Forces. So, we've got a violently expanding peanut shell and unseen jets shooting out at 180 kilometers per second. But what on Earth, or rather what in space, could act as the engine to launch this? Pure thermal expansion just doesn't cut it. This quote from researcher Donald E. Scott pulls us out of pure geometry and into the invisible reality of cosmic plasma dynamics. He notes that including the effects of electric currents is crucial for understanding many observed astronomical phenomena. Because when we look at these nebula, we aren't just looking at glowing gas, we are looking at highly conductive ionized plasma.
Let's walk through exactly how these invisible electric and magnetic forces build the ultimate launching pad. First, the dying central star expels highly ionized plasma. Second, because that plasma is superconductive, powerful electric currents begin to flow right through it. Third, following the laws of electromagnetism, these currents generate immense donut-shaped or toroidal magnetic fields around the star. Finally, these magnetic fields act like a giant cosmic railgun. They squeeze and accelerate the plasma, serving as the launching platforms that pinch the inner shell into that peanut shape and literally fire off those bipolar jets at 180 kilometers per second.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to ponder today. If invisible electric currents and massive magnetic fields can sculpt what looks like a simple 2D bubble into a complex, jet-powered peanut pointing right at our faces, what other cosmic illusions are we falling for? Every single time you look up at the night sky, remember that the universe is rarely exactly as it appears. It's a deeply complex, three-dimensional, electrically alive place just waiting for us to decode it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.